Hello and welcome to EduCurious. Today's special guest is Kim Poss, and she is from St. Thomas in the Islands, and she is a homeschool mom and also business owner. So she's juggling career and the full load of teaching a student. Well, she actually has two students. So I'm going to pick her brain this morning about what is it like to be a homeschool parent, and what is it like more specifically to do it in the islands, and how do you balance being a education provider and a career? So good morning, Kim. Welcome to the show.
Good morning, Amber. Thank you so much for having me today. Yeah, I love living in the islands. I love homeschooling the kids. It's actually, well, I like my career as well, but that's my favorite job. Something I've always been passionate about is homeschooling them, and I feel just thankful to have the opportunity to do that and grateful to do it in such a nice, warm setting in the islands. And
Tell
it's
me,
helpful. We have a big community here of homeschoolers, so that's very helpful as well.
tell me about this area and where you live. You said there's a lot of homeschoolers. Give me a brief synopsis of where you live and that community part.
So we live in St. Thomas, U.S. Virgin Islands. There's three islands in St. Thomas. We're really close to St. John and Water Island, which is part of St. Thomas. So it's great to live here in the Caribbean. We have options as far as schooling goes. It's kind of minimal. We don't have the best public school system here in the Virgin Islands. It's the U.S. territory. So a group of parents get together, they hire a teacher, and they rent off a space for a classroom, and they kind of homeschool that way. They're still considered homeschoolers. Here in the Virgin Islands, you do register your kid to homeschool, which I really actually love the program they have. Not to go too far off on that, but you do have to register your children to homeschool. You send the curriculum that you're teaching them, what they're learning. At the end of the year, you submit a portfolio, and if they choose to put your kid in a public school, they can. I think this is a great program just because I personally believe every kid deserves an education. So I think it's good to have this policy in place.
So, how long ago did you get started, and what was it like to go on that endeavor? I would think it'd be very scary to be like, all right, I'm going to do this. I'm the one.
I was terrified to start. And Scarlett, my oldest, was not even in kindergarten yet when I decided I was going to homeschool her. So I was actually, I went to school for business and I would teach them Spanish, which was my minor in college. And I would just teach them like different things. And I just really enjoyed it. And just the setting that we had, going on nature walks, which I love. And just, it just seemed like such a peaceful job for me, but I was terrified to homeschool her because what if she didn't get the education she deserved? What if I did it wrong? I was unqualified, all these things in my head. I met a mother who homeschooled, who was a teacher previously, and she was my rock. She was amazing. She taught me so much, and I just clung to her. At the time, there was a homeschool group here, and since then, some of them have moved off. It's a very transient island, and that can be tough living here in St. Thomas, but we just would hang out, and we were from all different parts of the world, all different walks of life, kids of different ages. Some of them, all had different careers previously to move in the Virgin Islands. And I just learned so much from them. We would have curriculum swaps where we'd swap curriculums, which was just so great and so helpful because, every child's different. So it's not, curriculums are not going to work for every kid. And just talk to these other moms and say, hey, what are you doing? What's your schedule like? And that was just, I don't know that if I'd be here today if it wasn't for those moms and having that community.
Can you walk me through a day in your life or a week, or if you start a new unit, just what does that look like to us?
Well, a day in our life, so we get up typically like, the kids are in school, they get up by 7:30, we have breakfast and then we start school. My kids now are in a routine where they know what they have to do. I print off a schedule every Sunday. I used to be really strict on the schedule. It had time frames for each subject. Since then, about 2 years ago, I've kind of let off of that, and it's really been helpful to kind of let that go, that everything has to happen in a certain time. So now we just get started. My kids they start with different subjects too. My son, he starts with language arts. My daughter, she starts with math. And the reason why is because math is her most difficult subject. It was her favorite subject until fifth grade. Yeah, so after that, it became, it takes her longer to do math. So we start with their least favorite subjects each morning, and they do that, and we move forward. Now, the balance of the two children being on different schedules, is can be difficult at times, but we just take breaks and they're used to that. And, he might do his handwriting while I'm going over her math with her and what she missed. Um, and then once we, have lunch, they play outside, just almost like a typical school day, but you're doing it at home. They have their recess time, then we have lunch and we get back into their more fun subjects, history, science, art, and those type of things. So they do have busy after school schedules. So we still try to finish 2:30, 3 o'clock.
So when you begin a new unit or a topic within your lesson, I'm sure it's gauged to her level and his level, but it can cover just like we would in public school where you cover these certain standards. Where do you go to get resources on? Maybe like for me, I might not be as familiar with European history, but I have to teach it. How do you go and find that information to then teach it to your student?
All over the place. So curriculum swaps with other moms. I get a lot of that. Just talking, of course, research from different. We actually pull from several different curriculums. My kids currently do Good and Beautiful, but we pulled from a lot of different avenues too. And I have several books. I usually plan that out during the summer, so I kind of know what we're going to be going over. So I can go to the library. I can order books online. You can get, curriculum that schools have used in the past. And I think that's a really good, plug into your local school and try to get some of that information, because that would be really helpful to make sure that your student is also, on the same path as, if you were going to put them in school or kids that are in school.
What's one of your favorite things about homeschooling your kids?
Traveling. So my kids do travel immersion during the fall. So we have traveled to different countries, and during the year we'll study that. So we'll study, for example, we did a big brain force study and we spent some time in Costa Rica. We spent a couple weeks there. Our most recent trip was we went to Austria, Italy, and Switzerland, and the kids studied, Rome, and they studied the Colosseum, and then they got to go see it, and just they got to taste the food, they got to learn the language. And that has always been my dream, is that, I live in this place where my business is so slow during the fall, and those 2 or 3 months we can travel to other countries, and my kids traveling the world. And that's always been sort of a dream of mine, and hopefully they love it too. They seem to love it. And I think that it's just so beautiful to watch them learn. So that's been my favorite part of homeschooling.
What's been some of your biggest struggles with homeschooling?
Balance, routine, just, trying to balance work and life with the kids. And that's been the most challenging.
Do you have any tips on what's worked as you figured out how to balance your two worlds?
Keep a schedule, but stay flexible. Know that you homeschool and that your schedule can change. And if the kids don't have something on Saturday, it is okay if I school on Saturday. It's okay if they do schoolwork on Sunday. Typically, when you homeschool, you're spending an hour and a half on a subject versus a kid in a classroom is only going to spend 60 minutes, if that, on a subject, right? So your kids aren't having homework and they're not having, but you can, a lot of times these curriculums, we can finish them in 4 days a week versus 5. So a lot of homeschoolers, they don't do school on Friday, or you can supplement and do something else. If you feel like your kid's falling behind in a subject, then put that on Friday, put that on Saturday. So I think that to just know that you can be flexible, and I think that that's been my biggest, but also have a schedule, because if you go into this without a schedule, I also feel like that's a bad idea. So have your schedule, but know that your schedule is subject to change.
A lot of times I've heard that people worry about like, how will my kids make friends if they're homeschooled, or how do they stay involved in the community? You do a really good job balancing that aspect of making sure your kids are plugged in to extracurricular activities. Can you explain some of the maybe the dynamics about how they are building friendships and they are plugged in, even though they might not share the same school day.
Absolutely. So that was, and that's also been one of my biggest fears is, are my kids going to be socially awkward? Are they not going to, socialize with other kids? How do I keep them socialized and also homeschool? And I hear that from a lot of homeschool moms. And also that's a big question that school moms ask, when you do homeschool. So for me, I ask what they're interested in. I try to get them when they were younger, we would have a homeschool beach day because we live in the Caribbean. So they'd get together with all different age groups of kids and they'd play we have in St. Thomas, I'm very fortunate that we have a lot of community events. So I try to plug them into that. My daughter's done Girl Scouts. My son, goes to a skate night where he communicates with other friends. They do multiple sports. We're very fortunate here in St. Thomas because we can put our kids in any of these sports activities that the private schools offer. And then we have our community sports. So my kids have done both because I think it's nice for them to, to do both. And they've also done field trips where they've got to go to schools. We have a really cool Gift Hill school in St. John that's like they have their own farm. So they've got to go in these field trips with other kids. So trying to organize that with kids in the community, I think is also, beneficial and important for the kids. And so just staying plugged in and knowing what the other schools offer. My daughter gets to go to a co-op school and do an art class. So she still gets like that classroom day and she gets a different teacher, which I think is really nice. We've tried that with my son. Sitting down and doing art is not his thing. He's super active. He's a super energetic kid. That's another, I feel like a blessing that I have. My kids are total opposite. So and that's really great. My son extremely social. My daughter's very shy. I think it would be that way even if they were in school. It's just their personality.
I'm
So
hearing a lot of, on your part, you're doing a great job with being attuned to your kids' needs. So thanks. I mean, like that's a big deal for parents to make sure they do realize their kids are completely different most of the time. And it sounds like your community really embraces the homeschoolers, which there's a lot to offer both ways. Like it's really nice for you to be able to plug into the public private school, the co-ops, but also for those children to see really good role models, really great kids, and just have the diversity of that. So I'm pretty pleased to hear that that's going so well over in the islands. Now in the States, there's a lot of similarities, but probably broadly speaking, if you had a friend that wanted to start homeschooling, what advice would you give in order for that person to get started on that path?
well, I would definitely say to try to find out if there's anything offered as far as schools, locally. And it does tend to, my sister homeschools in the States, and we talk about that because that is one thing she feels like that they lack there is not having those, that community option of joining, local schools. It might take a little extra digging. And for that, start a social media page. Or if you don't feel up to that, you could just ask around, other homeschool moms. But a lot of times, private schools are going to be more apt to allow that than public schools, I find, just because they don't have the space, right? That maybe the private schools will have. And then start your own community, start your own meetups, look, I think that if you research and look, that's one thing COVID brought us is it seemed like homeschooling became more popular and it sort of still is. And I don't know if that's just because of the schools, but also I feel like it has been, I've talked to a lot of parents around, even in the US, it's been a lot of, the traveling that I talked about. They've realized, hey, there's a lot of jobs now that parents can have where they could do that traveling. So it makes sense. So I would say just to still try to plug in. And a lot of times there's community sports too. So you could always, and if they don't like sports, there's so much out there. There's theater, there's, art. There's a lot of options you can do with kids if it's not sports.
Now, as your kids get a little bit older, are you going to explore doing some of the dual enrollment type classes within your community colleges, online schooling, or are you, as it unfolds, just kind of see where their needs are?
More see where their needs are. We have looked into, especially, I have a daughter that's in seventh grade. So we have looked into online enrollment for her that's accredited. We've also talked about the option of putting her in school, which she feels kind of torn. Her friends go to school, so some do, some don't. But I'm not sure yet. Next year, it does look like she will still be at home, is what we've decided. And we may do some of those enrollment. And there's so many options. And that's another, talking to other moms would have worked for them. There's a lot of online schools now that are fully accredited. And she's actually a year ahead in her studies. So that's kind of definitely a deciding factor to make sure that she would be, if she did have to go into a school, she'd be able to do college courses by the time she's in 12th grade. And that seems to be something that a lot of homeschool moms come up to. Their kids end up being a year ahead in schooling because you have all this extra time at home where they're learning, or you might have started a year early just because they were home. So now you have a kid that's ready for college a year before. So just trying to fill in, that time frame has also been, something I've looked into. But I've definitely, a lot of these online schools that are accredited, they do offer open houses, which are really nice. So I think for us, we'll probably do open houses at actual high schools, and then we'll do, open houses at, some of these online schools and just go with the best option. And they are Zoom classes now, and they do have other children in them from all over the world. Some of her friends do that, and they really love it. And I think it is a great option. But for us, we have decided we'll definitely by high school, it won't be what we have now, which is me, teaching her. I think by high school, she'll either go to high school or she'll go to an accredited online school.
Can you speak a little bit on the accreditation? What is important? What do you look at? How do you weigh the different accreditations or lack thereof?
So most homeschool curriculums they're not so much accredited, which is not super important throughout middle school. But what is important is knowing that your child is learning what they need to learn. And there's a lot of options for that. And most of them are diagnostic tests. So my daughter takes an IXL test at the end of the year. And that IXL test will tell me, and it takes her a course of a couple days. And and you can ask, if you meet a teacher from a private school or even a public school, you can ask them what they do at the end of the year with the students, and they'll definitely tell you, because most students these days do take a test. I don't know how it is at the school that you're at, but so right now we're doing an IXL at the end of the year, which will tell us where she's at. And I also try to plug in. So here in the Virgin Islands, she also has to learn like local history, which is different than US, right? So my daughter learns both, because what if we're not promised tomorrow in the Virgin Islands, we're in a big hurricane destination. What if something was happening? We moved stateside. So to me, that is my personality. I think of every scenario, which can be a blessing and a curse. But, so she learns US history, and she also learns the local history as well. So I think that's important too, to kind of know you can't always plan way in the future, but it is really nice and the best thing for your child, I feel, to know like what their future looks like. So as far as to answer your question, accreditation is very important when they get in high school, because once they get in high school, they'll need that accreditation to get a high school diploma. And I definitely want my children to have a high school diploma versus a GED, or, just a general education diploma, because that's going to make a big difference when they get to college. And I want them to have the opportunity to go to college. Also, to get a scholarship, find out what scholarships are offered, which we've already looked into as far as academic scholarship and what's required, because you don't want to, as a homeschool mom, you want to make sure that they have everything to apply for those scholarships. So that's why it's very important. And there's so many options. I mean, there's a ton. I can even send you if you end up wanting to put on, but there's so many accredited online homeschools that you can do. And some of these tests will also work. So I'm happy to, send some of that too. Some of the diagnostic tests, and those are important too. I love in the Virgin Islands, I kind of spoke about, there's a lot of controversy about the way we have to register school kids here. And to me, it's really important, because I mentioned, I feel like every child deserves an education, but it's also important, when we register them, they ask us what curriculum we're using, because you want to make sure that it's a curriculum. We love the one we use, and you want to make sure it's something, and you can print off online like what's required for kids to learn, and it's different throughout the different states. But it's, you want to make sure that the curriculum that you're teaching is what they'd be learning in school, because I personally feel like if my kids are not learning what they would learn in a classroom, or if not more than they would learn in a classroom, then I'm failing them. And I think that that's really important, because it's their future, and they have a right to have the education. So I love they have that policy here. To me, it's, you have to submit that portfolio. If they don't like it, they put them in, a public school. I think it's really great that that's done. And I really hope that, a lot of homeschool moms, but they'll help. So in return, in the Virgin Islands, if you need more information, they're really great about, hey, here are good curriculums. They'll send you a list. They actually have like an educator that does that here in the Virgin Islands, and she's great. And I've had the chance to meet her, and she'll send you like different options, and she knows a lot about the homeschool curriculums. And I think that just I wish every state would have that for homeschool moms because it's a really great resource.
If you could speak on a little bit about why curriculum is so important, and it's not just a willy-nilly thing, let's learn as we go. It's like there is a plan and a pathway. Curriculum to me is vital because we learn a certain way. I mean, differently we learn, but you have to go through those building blocks, the foundational elements, the learning pedagogy, all of that. But on your side, tell me about why curriculum is important to eliminate any sort of preconceived notions of, I will just wing it. Give me your thoughts.
Well, for one, like was mentioned, that the kid learning and the education that the kid gets, if you don't use a curriculum, then how do you know that they're learning everything they should be learning? The language arts and mathematics, it's different every year too. Like what I learned in seventh grade is not what my daughters learned in seventh grade. I'm pretty sure it's what we learned in high school. So it changes every year, and sometimes for the better. And I think that having a curriculum is it's not doing them any justice. They're not going to get to have that career one day that they might hope for, and hopefully have. I just think it's so important. There's also a ton out there. There's so many curriculums. We use the good and the beautiful. Some of that actually is free online. There's easy peasy homeschooling, which is a free curriculum. So there's no excuse to say, I keep my kid at home, I can't afford a curriculum because there's so many free options out there. I also always gift our curriculums, and a lot of homeschool moms do. So we have like a curriculum swap where everyone's just giving it away. So there's really no excuse. There's so much. Your local library probably has homeschool stuff, thrift stores, Humane Society. I take a lot of our past curriculum there. So, it's there as well. A lot of states are really easy for homeschoolers to school at home and will give you information. So I know the state of Georgia did. As I mentioned, I have a sister that homeschools in Georgia. She's used the good and the beautiful, easy peasy homeschooling, which is, like I said, it's free. It's paid by their homeschool mom. So there's really no excuse. Now, for me, I think that learning each kid. So I like the good and the beautiful. It's kind of artsy. It is beautiful. It lives up to its name. I like the creator. We've used different ones. We've used Bookshark, which is a ton of literature. It's very black and white. To know that I don't want to knock a certain curriculum because for my children and for another child, the same curriculum is not going to work. And that is a beautiful thing about homeschooling, that you can really plug into what the kid loves. My daughter loves art. And so the good and the beautiful has been